Hello and welcome. Weather in games can be much more than simply a visual effect. It can shape large parts of the overall experience. Heavy rain that limits visibility may change how players explore. Blizzards and heavy snowfall may impede progress and diminish your chances of survival. Hot, dry spells may negatively impact the growth of crops. In many modern games, dynamic weather adds realism, strategy, and atmosphere, turning environments into living, exciting, and often unpredictable spaces. For Minor Deity, I have the following main aims when it comes to weather. Firstly, weather needs to be localized, allowing various different biomes with different weather conditions on the same map. Secondly, weather needs to be dynamic, allowing both small and large changes over time, either via deliberate player actions or natural dispersion. Finally, weather conditions need to have a definite impact on the game, both visually and in terms of gameplay. Let's see how we can use burst compiled jobs on parallel threads as well as blended layers in a tri-planar tessellation terrain shader to achieve these aims on very large maps. A good place to start is how all the information for the weather will be stored and of course what needs to be stored. I decided that I wanted to cater for the following parameters. Temperature currently determines the amount of snow on the terrain and objects on it. Later, I will also let excessive temperatures impact plant health. When it rains, foliage does not grow immediately. Rather, surface water accumulates, causing puddles to form on the terrain. This surface water drains down to become groundwater, which then fuels the growth of foliage. This creates a realistic time gap between when the rain falls and its impact on plants. Similarly, when it stops raining and the surface water starts clearing up, surface water is slowly fed from below until the groundwater is depleted, again causing gradual changes in foliage. Wind speed impacts trees and foliage and makes rain and snow particles more or less chaotic. Finally, erosion determines how rocky the terrain is. If we want to have localized weather, we will need to store a set of these weather parameters for each local area. Underlying our terrain, we have a hex grid that is perfect for this purpose. It is not as fine as the underlying square grid used for elevations, but fine enough to allow detailed dynamic weather differences in small areas. We already store all kinds of information for our hex grid, and we now add 2 native arrays for our 5 parameters. We don't actually need huge ranges or significant accuracy in the decimal places of our weather values, so we can get away with the 2 bytes of the half data type rather than the 4 bytes of a float, reducing our total memory footprint. To start off, we set weather values for the entire map based on a few rules and randomness. Now, how do we link our weather values to the rest of the game, both visually and in terms of gameplay? Let's start with the terrain shader. Every pixel of the terrain finds itself somewhere between 4 neighboring hexes. Our aim here is to blend different terrain textures seamlessly based on the local weather of each hex. If we simply selected the weather parameters of the closest hex, we would get very noticeable seams when jumping between hexes, even if their conditions are fairly close. However, if we perform bilinear interpolation on the hex grid, we get smooth transformations throughout for the weather parameters. If we base our texture blending on these, the visuals are also smooth. The terrain shader itself is rather complex, sampling various different layers and blending them using height-based blending. That could be a topic for a future video, but we should at least consider how we get the weather data to the shader. We convert the 2 water parameters, the temperature and the wind speed of each hex into a color 32 value, which means each of them gets a byte and can range from 0 to 255. That's more than enough steps to produce smooth-looking gradients. Next, we create a texture 2D to store the weather parameters for all hexes. The filter mode is set to point since we handle the interpolation ourselves in the shader, and the wrap mode is set to clamp while we don't create MIP maps for the texture. To speed things up, we link a native array for the weather parameters straight to this texture's data buffer on the CPU. We can now alter the native array as the weather changes and run apply on the texture to send the data to the GPU. Then, inside the shader, we determine the coordinates of the 4 closest hexes using bilinear interpolation. Sample those 4 points and create a weighted average set of weather parameters for each pixel. This set is then used by the terrain shader to sample different layers and blend them together smoothly. Note that we have not sent the erosion factor through yet. We have to create another texture, group erosion with some visibility and zoning data into it, and also send this to the GPU in the same way. There's actually also a third such texture containing data about user-painted textures. So the terrain shader samples these 3 textures 12 times in total per pixel to get all the hex-related data together. And to go even further, there are also 2 textures for the data of the square grid, as well as one for 4 differently scaled noise fields per hex, which drives variability. That takes care of the terrain, but we also want the objects on the terrain to react seamlessly to the weather and visibility data. If every applicable shader also samples the required parts of the data, we can apply visibility, snow and drought adjustments on a per pixel basis, rather than a per model basis. Also note the interaction between objects and the terrain shader. Every square grid point has a set of flags impacting its behavior in the terrain shader. For example, the floor plan of a building will flag an area under and around the building to not have snow on the ground. And there are slight texture variations under trees. In addition, our rules for placing foliage can react to the temperature and water parameters of the hexes, so that the regional plant life suits the weather conditions. Our tree and foliage shaders also sample the wind speed of the region and adapts the extent of their vertex adjustments based on the wind speed. So, now that we have weather, how do we make it dynamic? Firstly, let's consider rain clouds and snowstorms. These impact a collection of hexes underneath them, gradually adding surface water or reducing temperature for these hexes. They also move across the map on Bezier curves that can be set by the player. In terms of cloud, rain and snow particles, we have central particle systems that manage the clouds, drops and snowflakes for all rain clouds and snowstorms. Each rain cloud keeps updating a central list of hexes over which it is currently raining, and the central system emits particles for all of those hexes over time. The amount of chaotic movement of the particles is determined by the wind speed of each hex. Something similar happens for sunspots, which gradually increases the temperature of the region. But I also wanted surface water to flow down slopes, spread across the map and congregate in hollows or recesses. I wanted groundwater to spread outward so that rain eventually impacts larger areas and foliage expands as time passes. I wanted very hot areas to gradually melt more and more snow around them as the energy disperses. So every frame, some of the hexes on the map disperse their weather conditions to their neighboring hexes. Surface and groundwater slowly spreads to other hexes, while the rate of spreading increases drastically when the hex is saturated or when the neighboring hexes are down steep slopes. This dispersion is performed for all hexes every 5 seconds, spread out across frames. Finally, you will notice that the visual changes are gradual and smooth, while the actual changes for each hex happen in jumps every 5 seconds. Rather than applying the changed values immediately, we keep a current state and a target state, and lerp closer to the target state each frame over a short period of time after the target has been changed, sending the updated data to the shader each frame. But because all the data is stored in native memory, all of this can happen efficiently inside burst-compiled jobs. While there's still a lot I want to tinker with, all of these factors together already does wonders for the visual immersion of the game. And that's it for this video. We haven't even touched on audio yet, which is of course a very important part of the entire experience, but also a topic for another day. Please leave a comment, subscribe to this channel, wishlist and follow Minor Deity on Steam, or join the Discord server to stay up to date. All the links are down below. Also feel free to ask specific questions you may have. Thanks for your time and support.